Okay. Hi, Jillian. Thanks for coming on here to do this interview.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you. All right, let's get this started. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, for our audience out here.
Okay, yeah. So I'm from New York originally. I'm still in New York. I have a bit of an interesting background. My family, I was raised by a Catholic father and a Jewish mother. My dad was from upstate New York. My mom was from Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. She was raised by immigrant parents. They met my parents at a bar in New York City. Currently, I'm living in upstate New York, in my childhood home, which is ironic for, what the work I'm doing. And it really tests me as well. So my mom's background is European Jewish. My ancestors are from like Austria, Latvia, Lithuania on her side. My dad's background is Italian and Hungarian Catholic, and ancestors on that side are from Southern Italy, parts of Hungary that I don't know of. And it's basically two different cultures that overlap. There was a lot of compromise and agreeing between my parents, but also a lot of arguments. So my parents were married by both a priest and a rabbi at the same time. And yeah, they side-eyed each other a lot during the ceremony. If my grandma were alive, I really think that she would have been happy with my mom marrying into non-Jewish religion or marrying somebody who wasn't Jewish. Religion was just like so important to my dad that he let my mom name us, me and my brothers, as long as he could raise us Catholic. So obviously names are huge in religion. My mom was very lazy juiced. She was like, okay, whatever, I'm cool with this, My brothers and I resented going to church. We couldn't wait for the day that we could just be free from it. We kind of like had our own styles and our own ways of life. And we didn't really like being told, how to live our lives. And that's kind of how it felt for us when we were going to church and living under our roof as well. My mom was a tough love, sarcastic, goofy, yet kind of direct woman, like a typical Jewish woman. And dad he was very good-hearted, yet passionate, but he was also explosive kind of man, which is the Italian, stereotype. So growing up home was very fun, but it was also very chaotic. I witnessed and was part of a lot of arguments from a young age. I fought a lot for my voice to be heard between the passion and aggression of my father and then the numbing and the logic of my mother. It was very hard to know how to feel or to feel validated in what I was feeling. So overall, my childhood was filled with the fun life that my mom had always wanted for herself, but it was also where I experienced a lot of generational trauma that I'm still working on, to this day. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. I could relate to some of the stuff that you said, like especially the religion part, because originally, my family wasn't really into that kind of stuff. And like the Catholic side, my family's not Catholic, but I started Catholic school and then I kind of converted and all of that. And that whole lifestyle of going to church and taking classes, it was just like a different thing for me. So yeah, let me not get into my story. All right, so what do you do now? What are you doing now?
Yeah, so now I'm teaching yoga religiously in the Hudson Valley, which is in New York. I'm also teaching in Puerto Rico, other parts of the world, online. I'm coaching one-to-one for people who've experienced loss and are ready to basically rise from the ashes of their trauma and just reclaim themselves. And all of that is done through shadow, ancestral, and inner child work.
Okay, I'm very interested in all that stuff. We'll get to that. Okay, so how did you get into working through trauma or working with people with trauma? Like, why did you start doing that?
So I had been curious about my family history since I was a little girl, as were my brothers, because we didn't really know a lot about our ancestors from my mom's side. A lot of them had passed in their 50s due to kidney disease. And I always wondered why they were why our family was the way our family was compared to other families. I was just like a little psychologist child running around. Like I was always questioning things. I think I always knew something needed to be talked about and addressed in our family, but it was being suppressed by my parents who hadn't even dealt with it themselves. So when I lost my mom to cancer, I realized I needed to really start unpacking all of this more than I already was. She was like my Buddha, my guide, but there was still, you know, things that she passed down to me and shadows that I developed that I needed to really look at to make sure I didn't pass them down as well. So take the good and then leave the bad. And I also needed to develop a way to sort of connect with my ancestors, because losing my mom was essentially the last living ancestor on the female side that I had. And I started creating practices to pray to my ancestors, connect to their wisdom. And typically this work will start after a huge loss or a traumatic experience, but it can start at any time, any age. The earlier, the better. It'll save many years of suffering. But finally, I needed to sort of look at my inner child because I had lost my parent, and I had to really start reparenting her, especially because I just lost my mother figure. And ultimately, all of this is sort of how this method was created from my own experience. And I think that we all learn a lot from our experiences, and we all have a lot of wisdom from them. And I kind of acquired the realization that these three things were a necessary part of my healing. They were a necessary part of everyone's healing. So.
All right. Okay. Okay. So, can you just explain, what the shadows are and, like the connection to trauma?
Yes. So shadows are essentially developed due to traumatic experiences, and they're emotions we've dictated as bad, or moments we've sort of labeled as bad, and we try to avoid them at all costs. That's why they're called shadows. We try to hide them, we want to bury them, but they're the exact thing we need to look at in order to begin the healing process. So an example might be like from my childhood, earliest shadow I can ever remember developing was when I was around 8 or 9. I hurt my hand. I cried to my mom, and she just looked at me and said, you get to a certain age and you can't cry every time you get hurt. You can't cry every time you feel pain. So as a little girl, I had developed this shadow that if I emote, I will be rejected. I will be abandoned. I'm too much as I am. I'm too much when I feel. So that was a traumatic experience that had sort of created a shadow. And it's something so small and minuscule, but the impact that it can have on us as human beings in our, today lives are huge, and we don't even realize.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now that you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, I got a ton of shadows.
Yeah.
There. And there are people out there that like to say, just move on, it's not a big deal. Like that happened a long time ago. Why are you still thinking about that? And sometimes to me, I don't think that's like a healthy way of looking at stuff. And for them, I'm feeling like maybe they're just not like really in touch with their emotions, you know what I mean? And learn to like push a lot of stuff down. But like you say, it comes up and it affects us. And sometimes we don't even know why we react to certain things. So yeah, let's go. Next one. Okay, so is there a connection between the emotional trauma and physical pain? Because like I'm coming from a point of, like my audience is, about degenerative disc disease and back pain, different sides of the feeling of that. And I talk about in my content, mindset and nutrition and routines, and all of that stuff has to do with, how we're going to fix the back pain. And sometimes I mention things about, meditation or, the chakras, all these different things. But for me, I feel like there is a big connection, and I'm trying to help people to see that it's not just about, exercising or popping, medication or whatever. Like there's an emotional side, there's like a mental side to this. So, like what do you think about all of that?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a connection. Obviously, the Body Takes Score. That's a great book that really goes over this. The body and mind communicate with each other constantly, and your mind is powerful enough to actually convince your body if you are sick or not. There's been proof that like you can actually think yourself out of cancer, or even think yourself into cancer. So when the nervous system is overly active, it really shows up in the body. And oftentimes our bodies are expressing what our minds can't even handle feeling or knowing. And that's known as psychogenic pain. There's a book called Biogenealogy. I can't really remember who it's by, but my friend let me borrow it. And it basically explains how we inherit illness from our ancestors via cellular memory. And I knew that my mom's side had passed away mainly due to kidney failure. She also had a lot of back pain. And there's definitely stuff tied to that with her emotions. But I wanted to really focus on the kidney failure because a lot of her family had passed away from it, and ultimately including her as well. And I wanted to understand how this kept coming up, generation after generation in my family. And I highly suggest reading this book too, especially if you're working with body pain.
Yeah.
Because there's a deep connection here that it reveals. And as I was reading, as it turns out, the kidneys are the organ for filtering. And when they're not filtering or releasing toxins, the kidneys actually shut down, and the toxins spread around the body. So I quickly realized that my mom's cultural background had a lot of loss, which led to numbing, suppression, and thus the toxins of their grief and their pain weren't being released and filtered properly. So it resulted in this inability to release toxins in the kidneys, which is the filtration organ. And then this evolved into a genetic kidney disease that actually has been passed down like generations in my family. And now my cousin, who's younger than me, has it. So our emotional health is directly tied to our physical health, and our trauma lives in our body and we need to heal it.
Yeah, definitely. Your dog is cute.
Is she moving? She's gnawing on her paw like it's corn on the cob right now.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so how do you help people to heal their trauma and their shadows? Like what are your techniques? I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit before, but just get into that a little.
Yeah, so there's a lot of features. I do sound bath healing classes, which essentially works with a lot of different like yoga instruments that help you get into a meditative space and also like elevate your frequency. I do yoga nidra classes, writing workshops, oftentimes writing from the heart or just writing letters to specific individuals from our past, from our present, from like maybe to our inner child. I also do somatic work, in-person and online yoga movement, visual meditations where you can meet your ancestors, your inner child, to like give or receive any messages. There's also tapping exercises. So you tap on the body and do some, positive affirmations. That's also somatic. And then finally, the one-to-one coaching calls that I do, which includes all of this in the package, where we assess your shadows, your ancestors, your inner child, go in deep, map out how you can, utilize these things that were passed down to you and how you can really benefit to heal from them and ultimately learn from them. So that's
a lot. You got a lot in your package.
Yeah.
Okay, so each of the parts, like you told me before, the SAI, and then you spoke about like yoga nidra. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Like some of those things, can you just like explain, the terminology and the somatic, or maybe I'm not saying it right, but just
no, you are.
Explain a little bit more about each of those.
Yeah, so the SIA basically that stands for Shadow, Ancestral, and Inner Child, and I just wanted to make it easier to say, so I condensed it. But the shadow, basically when we're doing shadow work, what we're doing is we're addressing our deepest, darkest wounds and traumas. There are things we're doing that are toxic, things that toxic people have, done to us. And it's also process of re-identifying who we are, what has been put on us, what has been imposed on us, and who are we in our truest form. So we need to look at our shadows and set up basically a table or a chair for them at the dinner table, hear them out, hug them, send them love, and then let them go. So then there's the ancestral part of it, which ancestral trauma, generational trauma, it's truly one of the biggest things that holds people back from progressing in this life. Because they have taken on the burden of an entire family history. Like right now, like us living here today, we're taking on all of that. We are the result of all of our ancestors, and that is a huge responsibility. And it's the whole ancestral trauma, it starts with an ancestor that has introduced a certain pattern into a family. Every generation has that trauma, and somehow or some way, even if not everyone in the family has been affected by it or has fallen victim to it, it still affects the entire family. So it's important to look at and release these patterns so you don't have to suffer from your family's indiscretions or negativity. You can release that. It's a very hard journey, but it's also beautiful and possible to heal from it. So you can begin to work with obviously the shadow, the inner child, the tapping exercises, the yoga nidra, which is like the guided visual meditations. And with, ancestral trauma, some people will call it a family curse. It's really ancestral trauma. Yeah. And then there's the final is the inner child work, which is basically it's an approach to recognizing and healing childhood trauma. It recognizes that our behaviors as an adult stem from our childhood experiences, and it focuses on addressing our unmet needs by reparenting ourselves. So we will literally do meditations where we are reparenting ourselves the way that we needed our own parents to parent ourselves, and communicating with our inner child, giving them, love and support. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like, like a handful of things, but like you say, it takes work and that takes time, because I did mention that in some of my content, like, after my whole back incident and, diagnosis and all of that, I was going through like the dark night of the soul when everything was just like, everything bad was all happening for, just like a whole year, a year and a half. And I had to really like, go into myself. It took a while. I didn't learn how to do that during the dark night. Like further down the road, like a year or so afterwards, I started to really learn how to go in and deal with some stuff, and still dealing with things, but it's a lot better than before. It's a journey. It's a journey. So thank you for that. Let's see what else. Okay, so we talked about the past life trauma, or was that, no, that was the ancestral trauma. I was saying, what was the thing about the past life trauma? Like, do you, believe in that? On top of the whole ancestral thing, like we have our own kind of lives. Like, you know anything about that?
Yeah, I think it's possible for sure. And if it is possible, then I think it's important that we do have a connection to our past life in every asset, because recovering memories from our previous lives, if that is how this process works, they can actually teach us lessons and help us in our current one. So I think that if past life trauma manifests, or even generational trauma, as current day issues, it's not due to punishment or karma. It's actually just past life trauma or generational trauma being carried from life to life in order to support our human survival and our spiritual evolution. So your ancestors or you in your past life use these techniques to survive in that lifetime, but they may not work in this lifetime for you. So in response to those past life wounds, it's important that we understand that we actually develop survival mechanisms and even fears, anxieties, phobias due to these protective mechanisms. So we automatically stay away from risky things that could result in similar traumas, and we may not even realize that it's connected to this. And again, this is all through the work. We can break free from all those fears and create the life that we want if we do decide to work on this stuff.
Wow. Yeah. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. Like seriously, like I have been like just watching videos and following people and trying to learn as much as I can about all this stuff. But I guess the best way is to find people that are specialized in certain things and then just have them help you out with it. And I'm like looking forward to really going in, like having a point in my life when I'm like, all right, I'm spending this time and I'm just focusing on my emotional, mental, like all, my spiritual health. Like I'm looking forward to that time when I could like really do that. Okay, so next question. Oh yeah, like this is my thing. I'm like, since you teach yoga, would you mind coming back another time and like show us a few basic moves that can help with back pain or something like that? That would be really fun. I would love to do that.
I also have like YouTube videos, but I would be so open to doing like a live class. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Love that. All right. Okay, so is there anything you want to share with us? Anything else that I didn't ask or what you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I guess maybe just like a message. There's definitely a misconception around like grief and loss and pain, and it's that we need to stay away from it, or it's burdensome, or it's too heavy. But I think that the opposite of that is true. I actually think that it's the greatest teacher you will ever have. It's like all of the love that you need to put back into yourself. And when we reframe the way we look at all of these things, shadow work, inner child work, grief, trauma, and they're no longer like monsters, but rather like friends. Yeah. And we'll come to realize and even be shocked by the fact that how have we ignored this friendship our entire lives, because it's actually one of the most beneficial friendships that we're going to have. So yeah.
Yeah, I like looking at it like that. Embrace the self.
Yeah.
Seriously. All right. So you said that we can reach you on your YouTube. Is it like your name? What's your channel?
Yeah, so I have a lot of different places you can find me online. My YouTube, I don't even know what my handle is. I gotta look it up. That's one of my videos. I probably can send you a few links.
Okay.
But my name on it is Jillian S. And I also I have a huge online presence. I'm also on Facebook. You can follow my page. It's facebook.com/Jillian Yogi. I'm on Instagram. It's at Jillian Stella. You could if we could maybe link all of this so it's easier. But also my online coaching is the only other service that I offer fully, completely online. And it includes all the yoga classes, meditations, yoga nidra, other somatic exercises, the assessment of your own SAI, mapping for your future basically, and then full access to me. And I do free one-to-one consultation calls so we can like figure out if it's a good fit. And then I also have a retreat coming up in Puerto Rico that's happening September 17th that focuses on all this stuff.
Sounds
So
like fun. All right. I'm going to link all your stuff on here. And I'm so happy that you got on here and, talked to me and cleared up a lot of this stuff for me. And I really hope that when I put it out, some people will, take what you are saying and like really, think deeply about it when it comes to pain. And maybe it can help them. Maybe you can help them. So
yeah,
thank you so much, Jillian.
of course. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm happy to have been here.